Hey, what's going on, everybody? So basically, this is the fifth video in the series that basically analyzes and breaks down the lawsuit that the Osundairo brothers have filed. They filed a lawsuit against the attorneys of Jesse Smollett. Before I get into this, again, I want everyone to know that I'm not a lawyer. I'm not licensed to practice law, and I didn't go to law school. So, this video is being made under the rights of freedom of speech, and it's for educational and entertainment purposes only. So, if you haven't seen them yet, here are the Unsandario brothers. Basically, they filed this lawsuit here. I've gone over this lawsuit and videos in the preceding videos. And basically, this video that we're going to do now is going to talk about strategy. Now, in terms of the plaintiffs, the Unsandario brothers, I think their basic strategy is going to keep this lawsuit in federal court. For example, if this lawsuit had gone to state court, they risk it going across, somehow the state becoming involved, or they risk somehow Jesse Smollett or the attorneys of Jesse Smollett getting favorable attention. This is why they filed the lawsuit in federal court in the first place, because they feel that Jesse Smollett got favorable attention in the state court. The other strategy is to actually keep it within the venue of Chicago. This is going to matter because it's going to cost time and money to litigate this case. Just the Unsandario brothers are obviously located in Chicago, so I would assume their attorneys are located in Chicago, whereas the defendants, Tina Glendane and Marcos Gargagos, is actually in California. I'm sorry, Tina Glendane, I believe, is in New York, and Gargagos is actually in California. So for them to go back and forth to Chicago to litigate this case is going to put them at a distinct advantage because they have to, continue to pay airfare. They're going to pay hotel fees, and then they're going to have living expenses while they're in Chicago. So if they don't already have business in Chicago, this is going to create a cost for them to litigate this case above and beyond the cost for them to actually hire attorneys for themselves if they choose to do so. So that's essentially it for the plaintiffs, the Ansandario brothers. The only other thing that I could see them doing is somehow coming back and actually adding Jesse Smollett to this claim, because nowhere in this claim is Jesse Smollett mentioned. You can actually go to the caption and you can see it's against Mark Gagaros and Tina Glendane and the Gagaros law firm. So I think that a good strategy would be to add Jesse Smollett to this claim, because the attorneys Tina and Mark were actually acting as agents for Jesse Smollett. So the strategies for the defendants, on the other hand, is going to be to change the jurisdiction and or the venue. If they were able, for example, to get this case in state court through some means, then it's actually going to probably cause some distress or psychological distress to the Sandario brothers, because they already believe that they're not going to get a fair trial in state court, which is why they moved it, why they filed it in federal court. So if it goes to state court, if they file a challenge to jurisdiction and gets it into state court, they could possibly get better treatment. I actually doubt it, but that could be one of the things that they do to help fight this case. Also, with jurisdiction, they could possibly somehow, well, more so with venue, they could possibly say, okay, well, this is a federal case, but the venue isn't correct. Let's get this in either New York or California. And what that's going to do is it's basically going to put the burden, the financial burden, on the Unsandario lawyers, because I doubt that the Unsandario brothers are actually paying for this lawsuit. More than likely, the lawyers in my opinion, more than likely the lawyers are doing it pro bono or in a contingency fashion, meaning that the Unsandario brothers wouldn't pay anything unless they actually won. That's just my guess. I don't know if they're actually paying it, but if I had to guess, I would say this is the case. So if the defendants were able to get this case in New York, or if they're able to get this case in California, that's going to put the financial burden on both the lawyers for the Osundairo brothers. And God forbid if they're able to split this case, which I don't even know if it's possible, and have a case in New York and have a different case and in California. I doubt that would happen, but if something like that would happen, that would be a catastrophe for this case. And if it's an option, no doubt the defendants are going to seek something like that. So the other thing is that they could argue that the statements were actually true. They can argue that Jesse Smollett did have a sexual relationship with one of the Unsandario brothers, and if they have proof, then that's basically going to substantiate their claim. The other thing that they can do is that they can argue unclean hands. Basically, the doctrine of unclean hands basically prevents someone going to court when they've done something wrong. So let me just basically read some case law for the doctrine of unclean hands. It says the doctrine of unclean hands refers to a class of suitors which a court of equity will not listen to because the conduct of such suitors is itself unconscionable. So essentially, they could come to court and say, well, hey, look, you know what? These guys were involved, by their own admission, they were involved in I would say, a fraud, so to speak. They didn't actually break any laws. I actually watched another video and it made sense. That basically said the Unsandario brothers didn't actually break any laws, but for the most part, they were involved in this scam to allegedly defraud the public, uh, the people of Chicago, and pretty much the general public, that Jesse Smollett was basically beat and the subject of a hate crime, right? So they can come out and say, hey, they were involved in this. They admitted to doing this. So how can they come back and claim, uh, you know, uh, damages against people who are basically defending their client? So they can essentially use the unclean hand doctrine to basically dismiss this claim altogether. So I think that the other thing is, which is interesting. I'm not actually sure, and I haven't had the opportunity to do any research, but I believe lawyers are giving some leeway to defend their clients. So it looks like they're saying in this claim that the statements that they made were after the criminal lawsuit against Smollett had finished, and it was unnecessary because the criminal lawsuit was over. Well, that's not really the case because there was still ongoing litigation. There still is ongoing litigation against Jesse Smollett from the city of Chicago to sue for, I think, $130,000 in work that the Chicago Police Department had to do. So in my mind, they had to continue to defend their client, because just because the criminal case ended didn't mean that the civil case was over. So I don't know. That's my take on it. Sorry, it was really rushed. This is my first time doing this, but definitely leave your comments, questions below, and definitely subscribe if you like some of this content.